This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
So I'll start the meeting at 6:01. The only thing before you, Joel, is to just review the previous meeting minutes, so it should be quick. With that, is there any additions, subtractions, revisions? Anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Yeah, I mean, I looked them over. I had nothing to object to, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes that were sent over via email for the previous meeting.
Second.
Great.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you. All right, so now we'll switch over to MLP. Kurt's not here, but he's part of the subcommittee. So Dan and David, I'll let you kind of lead the conversation to start, and then first we can all join in.
I might pass the baton to Dan because I was absent at the last meeting and it sounded like some good progress was made.
All right, so yeah, let me start with kind of the history. Let's start way back in time. So our town, Southampton, obviously we had passed a vote for. Actually, I should start before that. We had done a study. I forget which study this was. It was a town survey, and one of the highest voted things that the townspeople were asking for was fiber broadband. So we're like, okay, let's start looking into that. So we had a vote, two town votes for municipal light plant, and they both passed. And after that, we had reached out to a number of different. I guess they're kind of like towns that also like help other towns get fiber going, like Westfield, Whip City, and South Hadley, for example. And we had gotten a number of responses from those towns, and from all of them, the one that we find to be the most promising, this committee, which is an ad hoc committee that was formed for this purpose, feels that the one partnering with Westfield seems like our best option. So I think one thing that may help is if you can share with us, the experience you guys went through in your town, a similar thing. How did you go about going from just the townspeople want this or whatever started the idea to getting it making it happen?
Sure. Well, I want to thank you guys first for having me. I'll start with maybe just a little bit about my background so you can kind of understand how we got to where we ended up. I spent about 4 or so years working in the mayor's office here in Chicopee as an aide, and then I spent the next 6 or so years working in the Massachusetts State Senate for State Senator Eric Lesser. I also served a number of years on the Chicopee City Council. My work on municipal fiber runs concurrently with both my time as a mayoral aide and as a city councilor. Was really involved in the feasibility study process. Basically how it comes from, being an idea about something that you want to explore to how do you actually put it into implementation, right? And I know you guys have done a lot of work in this area, and I really want to commend you for that because it's definitely a hot topic. It's definitely something that people in our communities desperately want if they don't have it. But there's a lot of hoops to jump through to make it a reality. And so you're doing the really hard work to really make it a possibility. In Chicopee, we had the benefit of already having a municipal light plant that ran its own business, Chicopee Electric Light. So there was an infrastructure in place that sort of told us how something along these lines could work. But there was still a lot of stuff that had to happen. So we commissioned a pretty large scale feasibility study to understand the method of how things would be implemented, to understand cost structure, to understand the business plan, and to help us make a decision about the right direction for our community. And each community is very, very different. Chicopee is a very large community, Southampton, not so much, right? So decisions that you make, you have a lot less room for error than a community like ours. And I certainly appreciate that. And so we also were painfully suppressed by the Great Telecommunications God Charter, which I know your community is as well. And we just didn't find them as a willing partner to address a lot of the needs that we had and the problems that we had. And so we started a process. We did the feasibility study. It took several years before it became a reality. Building the actual business part of it was the most intensive part for us. You're looking at an approach picking between two potential providers that do the municipal fiber that really absorb a lot of that planning work that you would otherwise have to do. So that's really a great benefit. Those two companies I give a lot of credit for because they've really had the foresight to think about how they can not only help their own community, but really go out into other communities and do things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do because it's just too hard for 351 communities to create their own businesses, and maybe they shouldn't either. So you have a really interesting opportunity. I will say, I think you've done the work of actually forming the light plant on paper, and then the work that has to happen as you think about building the coalitions within your community for support, the potential funding apparatuses that will exist going forward. It's a scary number. I had an opportunity to look over the two RFIs that came in between the two. I know one had a somewhat concrete number. It sounds like a lot of money, but I wouldn't let that be something that holds you back as you think about this, because number one, when you think about doing potential feasibility studies, there's grants available to help you do that can absorb the cost. That didn't exist for a community like us years ago. And now there's a huge emphasis, not only from state government, but also private partners to really invest in this kind of thing. And so there's support to be able to do that. And I think you'd have a compelling case to do that. And then when you look at the cost of the total build out, 14, 15, 16 million, whatever it ends up being, I think, you factor in the fact that you probably go out to bond for something like that, to fund, unless you get something dropped in your general fund that you don't normally have. The goal is always about mitigating the impact on the taxpayer. And for smaller communities, that's a huge, huge thing. And so that initial investment, if you could fund it with grants, if you can minimize the bond payments, to really not make it have a huge impact on the year-to-year budget. Once you do that initial construction, once you get to the point where you're rolling people on the rolls as customers, you're going to be able to start paying off your debt service with the revenues that you have from the service. So it sounds like a really long runway to get there. But we're long past the era of do these kinds of entities work? I'm sure you heard at the beginning the horror stories of the several communities that failed when they first got involved in this. Those communities got involved in an era where no one knew what fiber was, and it was a totally different world. And they were a little ahead of their skis, which is why they failed. They got too big too fast. Now everybody wants this. Everybody needs this. The pandemic and connectivity really pulled that back, and people got a chance to see how important that was. And it's now a huge economic development tool for communities. If you don't have it, your community's at a disservice, and your opportunity and ability to grow is really tied to your connectivity. So I think it's definitely something that you guys should continue to explore. I think you're going to have to convince people in the community. You're going to have to convince the select board. You're going to have to get people on board with something that sounds like a big dollar amount. But my recommendation to you would be to sell it as something that has a large return on investment, and is essentially future-proof at this point. So that's my long-winded answer. Happy to expand on any specific questions, but really excited to see the work you all are doing.
Joel, you probably did the analysis before. I have Xfinity where I am.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering Comcast customer. But whether it's Xfinity and Comcast or Charter, Spectrum, whatever they are, how do the rates that you've seen in communities for internet compare to the big cable companies?
Yeah, I mean, that was really the outside of wanting the actual infrastructure, which I'm someone like me and someone who is a little bit of a nerd on these issues, knows is really important. There's the bottom line pocketbook issue, right? We're saving seniors a lot of money and our families a lot of money just by being able to reduce the cost. We're in Chicopee, and I as far as I can remember, the prices are pretty similar in Westfield and South Hadley. We charge $59.99 for the 500 megabyte service, and $75.99 for the 1 gig service. And for the average person who's just streaming YouTube TV, for example, all you really need is the 500 megabyte service. I got the gig because I love the gig, and I just wanted to say I could get it. But I'm not, in all honesty, I'm not computing at a rate or using enough service that really justifies it. So you're talking about taking people who were having $250, $300 bills and reducing those to well under 100 when you talk about, whether they add some subscription services or not for entertainment. It really does save people a lot of money.
Yeah, that makes sense to the data that we had gathered. Megan had just sent out a survey. Maybe she can talk a little bit about that. And the results we saw from the costing people were seeing.
It was like deja vu for me looking at your survey, by the way, because we did one similar, and it just rings completely true to what we experienced.
Yeah, so we put out the community survey. We got a fair amount of responses back. Did you see the results or just the survey part?
I did see some of the responses.
Okay. Yeah, I posted the Excel spreadsheet format of it. Couldn't figure out a different way. So a lot of the responses did say that internet was, and correct me if I'm remembering it wrong, I'm just scrolling through it, but some were 50, some were 110, some did put the 270, maybe combined phone, cable and internet together. But we found that a lot of people want it. And we left a comment section, and a lot of them were, please do this ASAP. I moved from Goshen, where I grew up, to Southampton 4 months after and miss it. So I think it's certainly important and will save money for the townspeople.
Yeah, and from the cost side of things, I think it's also important to frame it this way, right? And Charter will say they have 1 gig service. Xfinity will say the same thing. They don't. They don't have a fiber optic network, and they're never going to build one, no matter what they say. A good example is that as you look at the early 2000s and Verizon Fios, which was big out in the eastern part of the state, they just stopped building it because they didn't want to compete with a market share they knew they just couldn't catch up with, and a price point that they couldn't catch up with. Xfinity or Spectrum, whatever it ends up being, Verizon, they're living off what we call a legacy network, right? This is something that was built in the 70s and 80s and sometimes even before, and they've been able to basically have a monopoly on the service in our communities. It's a huge money maker for them, and it's not in their interest as a business to to rewire the whole network to provide consistent and better service. It's just not in their interest, and they're not going to do it. They do have the the privilege of owning poles, which definitely has a cost associated, which I know that you guys have sort of explored that just a little bit. They have the ability for their infrastructure to cost them less, and know that people don't have options. So they're not going to improve their service, and it's incumbent upon the communities to really do this for themselves. There's no private entity that's going to come in and rewire Southampton and provide fiber service to your residents. And you'll be able to offer them, as I said, at a rate that's really not something that they compete with. And I also, as you go through this process, I know you're in the relatively early stages of this at this point. You look to our neighbors in Hampden who went through something similar. Charter spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to defeat that town meeting vote to prevent that from happening. That was a drop in the bucket to them because they were just spending some money to continue their monopoly, and they were able to successfully stop that. They'll probably do something similar in Southampton if you ever get to that point. So that's why this stage is so important. Educating people, having those community conversations, getting the community buy-in, because when at the 11th hour they show up with a political ad buy to try to convince people in your community it's a terrible thing, you will have already had months and years of conversation that they'll know better.
Has there been any, speaking of like Camden, has there been any communities in our area, probably Eastern Mass has quite a few, but Westfield and Holyoke and South Hadley and Chicopee, they all like you said before, they have the luxury of having a built-in MLP. Mm-hmm. Has there been any regional communities that have partnered with any of those so far, or would we be one of the first?
You definitely would be one of the first. I know. I don't think this is embargoed information, but I think it is becoming well known. Longmeadow is about to contract or has contracted with Fibersonic, and as they were in a similar situation to you, trying to decide between the two. Whip City just had such a long runway because so many people are having conversations with them and want to do this with them because they've been around longer, so they're able to expand at a much faster rate than Fibersonic. The benefit for Longmeadow is they're able to get on the queue pretty fast and start the process, because it does take time to do all this work. So Longmeadow is definitely one that's getting ready to do it right now. And I've had an opportunity to meet with a few of their select board members and answer some of their questions. It's continuing to grow. East Longmeadow is one that's also having that conversation at the early stages. And I always encourage communities as they're thinking about doing this. It's worth a conversation with your bordering towns and communities to see if it's something that they want to explore at the same time. Because if you're able to do it in concert, that this has not happened yet, but it will make the build out costs go down if you're able to collaborate. So that's definitely something I would recommend exploring.
A couple of things. I've always been sort of impressed with Chicopee as far as, if I remember well, back a number of years, I think you were one of the first in the area to have intra-city Wi-Fi, which impressed the hell out of me as a dumb old engineer. What kind of services besides, what do you offer? Do you offer VoIP? Do you have your own ISP? How are you set up?
So we purchase our internet from HG&E,
okay,
and we tie them into our system. We don't offer VoIP yet. I'll be honest with you. There's not been, since I got out of it, which is with direct involvement, it's been a few years now. There's not been the visionary leadership in terms of the business model. It does take someone with a vision to build the business model to make sense for your community. And I say that because you probably heard the example of Burlington, Vermont as a failure when it first got started. But that's really not the case anymore. They've definitely changed hands several times and went through a lot of ups and downs. and they're not fully a municipal entity anymore, but they're sort of part of like a co-op entity at this point. But they fixed a lot of things. And one of the things they do really well is the customer service side of the house. And I know Fibersonic is doing this as well, where, one problem that we have in our community, we have an aging population, a lot of seniors in our community, right? And so the concept of cutting the cord of something you can just turn on and turn on, NBC is by hitting a number, right, is a little overwhelming for our seniors who don't have the technological background. They come in and they do classes. They'll do, like, literally in your home, they'll come and show you how to sign up for YouTube TV. And they really offer like 24/7 customer service to make sure that this can be successful. Our business model in Chicopee would be 10 times more successful if we did that, because that is a base of folks that really would be into cutting the cord, but just don't know how to and aren't comfortable with doing that. So that's the other added benefit. You can't beat the customer service side of things. You call somebody, you speak to somebody that's in your region and is actually picking up the phone and not in a foreign country or whatnot. So people do appreciate that as well. And I can tell you, I was one of the first customers by chance. We did the fiberhood method where we slowly built out. I thought we could have done a little bit faster, but that's another story for another time. I have not had a single outage in the several years that I've had it. And we went from having an outage a couple of times a day with Charter to where we are now. It's night and day. And I know it's only worse out in your area. So that's also preventing people from saving money. Even if they stuck with Charter, the fact that they can't rely on their TV to work half the time would really be a problem. So again, selling the return on investment, I think that's got to be your biggest selling point to your community.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point about cutting the cord. It was probably the highlight of my life, with being able to cut that son of a gun. And yeah, and grab, jump over to YouTube TV. But you're right. We also have an aging population. Look at the gray hair here, and that's a very good point about Fibersonic. Is that the whole South Hadley group? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, that's something to really think about. I know we're pushing Westfield big time, but those are some questions we should be asking Westfield, how they would handle a situation like that. And of course, in a community like ours, the oldies but goodies are the ones who vote and have a tremendous amount of influence. The young folks don't seem to want to do that as yet, but eventually they will. And you bring up some very good points there.
No, I mean, that's really important into selling it to your community. You got to make, it's about your ability to get across the finish line. And if you can't win the vote at town meeting, then it's going nowhere. So, I'd make it a pocketbook issue. I'd make it a money savings issue. And look at the added benefits that come with it down the line. I think people will show up as long as you educate them and don't allow the stream of consciousness to be dominated by someone with ulterior motives at the last second.
Yeah, this would be I'd say this would be a very successful meeting if you can help us figure out what our next steps are. At least for me, that's part that's really kind of nebulous. Like, it's not obvious to me how we go from currently where we are, where we got it down to 2 neighboring vendors, and where we would as an ad hoc committee, we said, all right, we want to go to Westfield, but how do we go from that to like, as an ad hoc committee, do we have the authority to decide that for a town? Is that something that our select board has to decide? Like, who has the ability to be like, okay, yeah, we're going to go do that and start working with these guys or those guys? And because I think that's the next step, maybe, is choosing who to partner with, because I imagine they have the knowledge and experience to like help us from there,
Well, thank goodness we have a select board member on this committee. right?
I wonder who that is.
I think when we're dealing with that, ultimately the select board has the final say in entering into any contract or bonding or anything like that. But Dan, there's a lot on our plate right now, so it's really deferring to this community. But legally, it's entering into agreements and stuff like that is the select board. I think it's the funding aspect is one thing. We still have to look at is it feasible? So even if before we spend the $15 or $60 million, we have to spend I forget how much it was. What,
couple $100K? Yeah.
Right. To see if it's even feasible and to build that business model, which I think we could probably do. But we're gonna have to build it into the budget and figure out, where does it rank along all of our other projects. And no pun intended, but what our bandwidth is.
And that's where I get back to like you said earlier, Joel, there's probably some grants out there for that part of it. And I would think that these partner organizations may have a better like database of possible grants to go after for this type of thing than
I'll butcher the name of it, the entity at the state level, but there's a state municipal broadband carve out entity that awards grants all the time for these kinds of things. In fact, I was just reading the other day that the town of Truro got a pretty large award to do a feasibility study and work on a phase 1 implementation. Not that, so I would recommend trying to look at that. And I say that because, and like I said, I did a very short gloss over the RFIs. I know Whip City had a pretty detailed proposal that a response to that, but not to poke holes in it. They're really just sort of, looking at your, surface area of your community and estimating based on that. They also estimated a 50% take rate, which means that their build out is estimating that 50% of the people in your community will sign up for the service. And I will tell you that is an arduous effort. It does take time. We're around 35% right now of the available area. And again, that's why I want to impress upon you the needs to have those community conversations, to market it appropriately. We're making money on the service at this point. That's not a problem. And you will make money pretty quickly because there will people who will just, flock to it. But that's a lot of money up front. That's probably not a really baked in cost estimate. It's really sort of back of the envelope math as far as I could tell. And so a really true feasibility study, I think is really important to protect yourselves as you look at how you want to do this and what makes the most sense for you. And I know everyone's excited about it, and doing a study that will take another 6 months or however long that will drag this process out can be a little bit disappointing. But I really do recommend it because it looks at things more than what Whip City or another vendor could look at. It'll look at the demographics of your community. It'll look at how it could elevate your economic development. That feasibility study will really be a really essential tool to you making that sell to the community. And in the interim, as you start to think about doing that, and you can do these feasibility studies for there's wide ranging amounts, but you're not a huge community. They've been done for $150,000. There's no reason for yours to be anywhere near that. I think ours at the time was in the $60,000 range. So below that for sure. It just provides you a lot of ammo to advocate for it, and really insulates you from any potential issues you might have.
All right, so that sounds like our next step, maybe.
Now, does the would Holyoke or Westfield, would they actually do the feasibility study, or are there other vendors out there that may not be the actual
What I know is
providers.
that most communities contract with someone outside of the person who wants the contract. There's a little bit of a self-interest for the entity that's doing it if they're actually doing the build out. So I think that's important to have a sort of unbiased look at it. And I'm happy to share. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I'm happy to share some of the few ones that I know.
Yeah, if you could send it over to Scott, that'd be good.
You wouldn't happen to be available, would you?
I've done some stuff like this, and certainly happy to talk a little bit more to see what you're looking to do. Um, Definitely, as a smaller community, would be something that I think would be within my bandwidth. But I also wanted to make sure that you guys get everything that you're wanting as well. So
Write that down, Dan.
Oh, Scott's got Joel's number. I'm sure.
Hopefully on speed dial.
Yeah, there you go.
can I ask, what is the conversations that you've had with the select board, and what's their temperature?
I would say, they like Scott said, they got a lot of other things going on right now. So not much conversation about this topic. I mean, I believe they're aware that we've been working this through over the past 2 years or so, and we've gotten to the point, where we're ready to start doing bigger things. We've done a lot of the background work, and we need to start making some decisions to get some more data, and we need some money to do that. So yeah, that conversation, we got to arrange to have that with the select board when they have time.
Yeah, it's never too early, even just to pull them in and sort of give them a briefing. I don't know if you're going to issue like a final report of your committee to them, something along those lines, but definitely bringing them as part of the process is key to taking it to the next stage. And of course, listen, as a municipal government guy, I can appreciate how much is going on right now and how they're bombarded with 50 million other things. But for this to work, you've got to really make it easy for everybody. And there's ways to make it easy for everybody if you structure it appropriately.
Yeah, so it sounds like talking to the select board is part of our next steps, and talking about how we can go about maybe proposing to them, saying this is what we've done so far. The next step would be a feasibility study that's independent of a specific vendor, that really helps to ensure that all the best interests of Southampton are covered with whatever choice we make, and looks
And
into
even seeking approval for them to pursue a grant that would fund that feasibility study. It's always better to spend other people's money.
Yeah, that'd be great if we can tie a grant to it as well. Be like, hey, this is what we've done, this is what we want to do, and we also have this money available to do it. That seems like a home run. Yeah. So that kind of makes sense to everybody else, or?
Yeah, I think it fills in a lot. I was a little nervous about, these, what are they called, RFIs or whatever we've sent out. And it just seemed like a fait accompli. And, it's too much damn money, $14-15 million a shot here. We can't blow this. I was telling my wife today, boy, that's one of the last committees I don't want to be on, is a damn MLP. This thing could go belly up and be running us out of town on the rails. But yeah, this is a great step about the feasibility study and getting an independent look at what we got here. And that's why I sort of initially liked Holyoke, because they seem to have been, having lived in Holyoke for many years, I was always so impressed with the forward thinking there, and the first ones to bring fiber in, and they still are the leaders of all this. Everything sort of ties through Holyoke. But this has been very helpful, and I really thank you, Joel, for sort of making me feel better about the next steps.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity and at your disposal if you have additional questions. Scott knows how to get a hold of me, and I want to commend the community for picking Scott because our administrations succeeded each other, but always a top-notch guy, and he's as seasoned as they get while still looking relatively young.
Yeah, amen to that. That's for sure. Yeah, we're very lucky.
Appreciate it. Well, guys, appreciate it. I'll let you get on with the rest of your meeting. And if there's anything that comes up, just shoot it over to Scott and be happy to get back to you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. All right. Take care, everybody.
Great night.
Thanks, Joel.
You too.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
So now we need to get money for a feasibility study.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Think so.
Or maybe some bid or cost for feasibility studies at the same time, right? Because most of the grants are like, okay, how much do you want?
Right. Exactly.
And I changed in the notes, he said municipal broadband group. So I assume that was Massachusetts Broadband Institute that he was talking about.
Yeah.
So I'll share my screen. The way I went about this is what just jumped, is kind of just take our questions like word for word of what people asked and then summarize his answer. It's all jumbled now. I'll put spacing in between it, but it's just how I chose to do it. Is there anything that you want specifically in the notes to remember later while you have it fresh in your mind?
I mean, I think we know what we want to do next. We want to try to summarize what we've done, get together some interested or some quotes for feasibility studies such that we can use those to pursue grants, and with that would be able to approach the select board and be like, give them a status of this is what we've done and this is where we're going to approve for us to get this grant.
Dan, we do have or Scott, we do have a grant committee, right? Somebody that sits down and writes these things.
Yeah, Chris Fowles is on it. I don't know who else is on it.
Yeah, I think Diane Fetterman, there's a couple of folks. Yeah, okay. I mean, we should bring them in somehow, obviously, too. Or maybe that works through the select board. I'm not sure.
Okay. So I think I captured all of that. Then the next steps.
Good job.
Thanks. It was hard to keep up, but very good questions. Do we want to continue the conversation, just us right now, kind of absorb it and talk next meeting?
Yeah, we should move on, I guess.
Okay. Novus Insight, anything updated with that?
From my end, no. Scott may have further info here. Everything is running quite well. Our chief technician, he's in Europe right now, in Scotland, I believe, or Ireland, but he'll be coming back shortly. I don't know, Scott, have you heard anything about the Wi-Fi network stuff?
Not yet, but we did meet, Art and I did meet with Novus about expanding their coverage to the fire department, police department, and the library as well. More and more, it's getting more and more every day. It seems like the vulnerabilities and the lack of maintenance is really creeping up on those departments, especially the fire department. So we're just waiting for that quote to come in to see how much it's really going to cost us. And then for the fiber, I know that we have the equipment. We're just waiting for the wiring company to schedule to come in to run some of the wires. And then Novus, the easier part will be them coming in on a weekend and doing all the setup. So we do have all the equipment though. So
great.
And we may want to think about also expanding Wi-Fi to the current fire department just because they're so close. And, you know, if it costs a little bit more money, we don't have to pay 2 cable bills until we get municipal fiber, at least. And then, you know, that could save a little bit of money, but also they could actually join onto our network as well. So.
Great. Did they have like any pricing with coverage expansion, or
It's coming.
it's coming? Okay, great.
I know that's actually a grant we've seen before for municipal networking. So if we wanted to get some wires run between the fire department and the town hall, I remember seeing grants for that one before, specifically. They didn't have grants for covering, you know, townspeople's internet, but they would cover the infrastructure for a municipality. So
Because we're so close, Dan, we were talking at the meeting that Scott and I had with Novus about an extender or
Yep.
you know, an antenna basically between the both sites. You know, it
sure.
can be hung off the outside of the building, and so that's something.
Even easier.
Yeah, they're looking at any running wires underground, whatever is expensive, as you know.
Yeah, but a wireless bridge to connect the two, you got clear line of sight between all 3 buildings. So
Yeah.
What's the third building? Your house?
no, fire, police, and
Oh, the police. Oh, okay.
And library, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'll be a 4th if you want. Doesn't make any sense backing up charter with charter though.
All right. So good news about that. Other future topics, moving on, I suppose, technology policies, solar, community solar, and library conference room.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay.
Well, for future topics, I might think about maybe doing some capital planning with our technology, especially with like the hardware and the laptops, and maybe getting help just putting a plan together on, you know, what's the standard procedures for switching out computer workstations and how often should those things be? Yeah, just, you know, things like that might want to be a future topic as well.
Mhm.
Because we don't
Yeah.
really have a cap. Yeah, I know that we're looking at a lot of the capital 5-year planning, but I always wanted to include technology in that, not just, you know, dump trucks and fire apparatus. So
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah. Yeah. And plus any grant that becomes available, you know, we would have the data ready to go.
Do we as a town have an inventory of the computers
No.
people have? Okay.
No.
Because that seems like the foundation, right? Say if we
Yeah.
wanted to get everybody on like a rolling wave of upgrades.
That's a good point, Dan. We should do that for sure. Yeah, maybe I can start looking into that.
Dumb question. Was it not already done when everything was upgraded?
We're not that smart.
How do you know what to update?
that's one of the issues.
It
Okay.
was kind of chaotic when it was applied, unfortunately, but it should not be hard to do it. You know, we should have everything together, you know, including like serial numbers and so on and so forth. Yeah, we should have a tag. Wherever I've worked, we've always had, you know, all the equipment was tagged, and it was, you know, put into a spreadsheet, and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, from an insurance point of view and for other things, so it's something we should be able to do pretty easily.
Okay.
It's a good point, though.
New business that cannot wait till next meeting. Okay, nothing. Being summer, but being also MLP heavy right now, do we want the 4th Monday of this month, skip it to August? How are people's calendars lining up?
I guess the question is, what do we want to set for our goal for the next time? And if we know what our goal is, we can figure out how long it may take us to get to that. Maybe it has something to do with fiber.
Do I talk to select board, Dan, or do you, being the liaison?
I don't think we have the information to talk to the select board. I think we want to have something a little more put together, right? We may want to know a little bit more about what a cost of a feasibility study may be, what potential grants could cover that, summarizing everything that's been done so far. I think those are some of the things we want to try to pull together.
Okay.
So what you're saying, Dan, we should probably meet the 22nd then.
Sure.
Fine with me.
Okay. Zoom or in person?
Sorry?
Zoom or in person?
Oh,
Anyone have a preference now that we've done both?
yeah, I don't know. I'm comfortable with either one, but I kind of like Zoom, but
I'm personally for Zoom as well.
yeah.
But
I would go for Zoom just because we will be just getting back from a 10-day vacation the day before, and I don't even know what my child's situation will be. So
okay.
Yeah, I think Zoom is good,
Okay.
especially during the summer.
Okay. That sounds good to me. Did we develop that goal for next meeting? Just to kind of flush out the MLP stuff?
Sounds like, yeah.
I'm not sure where we are with the structure of the MLP.
Right.
I haven't had a chance to really look into it. I mean, and you have to have an MLP board of, who appoints the board, who doesn't, terms, are they elected, are they appointed, things like that. I'm not sure how far along we are with that. It
Yeah.
might be something to look at.
And Joel had mentioned a coalition for community support. Would that be the board that you're talking about, or separate?
Well, just from a legal standpoint, an MLP board, as a legal entity.
Okay, right. Okay. I'll add that to new business just so there's record of it. How to develop MLP board, I suppose. Discuss at next meeting. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Second? That wasn't my second. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Does anyone not want to adjourn? Okay. It's 6:48 and we're officially adjourned.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.